So, as we know, the tradition of Indian classical music is more or less bifurcated into the set dichotomy of North Indian classical music, which is Hindustani music, and then you have South Indian classical music, Carnatic classical music. So, basically, when I say Indian classical music, that is the general understanding out there. But in falling into the trap of just two systems, we underestimate the richness of Indian culture. Here we have to take into final account that there are several divisions of ancient Indian music that were put into this simplistic binary only in the early 20th century, say. Before that, this understanding that Indian music only exists in the north and the south, and whoever decided the north-south axis for division of the musical stream, it sounds like an oriental thing that has been brought out from the early research on Indian classical music, again a part of that oriental study by Western researchers. Left out in this binary classification of North Indian and South Indian was the East Indian school of classical music, which we traditionally call Odissi music, Odissi being an adjective that simply means from Odisha. Now, this tradition of music is unique in the sense that it has its own treatises, it has its own shastraic tradition, it has its own performative tradition, which is also having certain characteristics, technical differences that differentiate it from the other systems. Now, the Andolita Gamaka sounds something like this. The fixed note, if we sing static fixed notes, it will sound like Sa re ga ma pa da ni sa sa ni da pa ma ga ri sa. So that is plain note which we will sing in every tradition. In the Avarohi Kriya, in the Odishan tradition, we will use the Andolita, which sounds like sa ni da pa ma ga ri sa. This is Ekaguna, and if we do it in double the speed, it sounds like Sa ni da pa ma ga ri sa.
Prabhu mote diya kasana Jagannath namoku manare he jo Jagannath namoku Jamar gali bhanjana Devadhi Devarajo Jagannath Namoku Manare Hejo Jagannath Namoku.
And these are the three great masters of the three schools. The first is Ashtavadhani Acharjya Tarini Charan Patra from the Ganjam school, great master of the Ganjam school in the 20th century. As I was saying, very rooted in the Veena tradition. Secondly, Gayakaratna Singhari Syama Sundarakara, whose singing you just heard from the Puri tradition with deep bassy voice culture and dominance of rhythmic kriyas from the Kala Angsa lineage of the Mardala playing tradition. And last of all, Balakrishna Das, Sangita Sudhakara, Pandita Balakrishna Das from the Kathak tradition, which was the Renaissance tradition. Ever from the 18th century onwards, Kathak became the central place of musical cultivation.
Srimati Sripati Vrindavane Keli Rachine Srimati Sripati Vrindavane Keli Rachine.
Namaste, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Indic Talks organized by the Center for Indic Studies. I am Ojasvi Mishra, and as many of our viewers know, we have discussed the legacy and richness of Odisha time and again on our channel. Today, we shall represent to you a lecture on the distinctive features of Odissi classical music. The talk shall focus on the aesthetic features and stylistic devices of the Eastern School of Indian classical music, the Odissi music, focusing on both the theoretical and practical aspects of the form as per tradition and treatises, with special focus on Sangitanarayana. To elucidate this, we have our speaker with us, Prateek Pattanaik ji, a musician and a scholar belonging to the tradition of Odissi classical music in the lineage of the 20th century maestro Acharjya Tarini Charan Patra. He has two published books and is currently pursuing his PhD in the Department of Odia in Berhampur University on the 17th century Sangitanarayana. I welcome you, sir, and I request you to take over from here.
Namaste. Thank you for the kind introduction. You already mentioned the subject of the talk. I speak about this tradition as a practitioner, more as a disciple of my guru. So I have a presentation, I'll just share it. So as we know, the tradition of Indian classical music is more or less bifurcated into the set dichotomy of North Indian classical music, which is Hindustani music, and then you have South Indian classical music, Carnatic classical music. So basically when I say Indian classical music, that is the general understanding out there. But in falling into the trap of just two systems, we underestimate the richness of Indian culture. Here we have to take into final account that there are several divisions of ancient Indian music that were put into this simplistic binary only in the early 20th century, say. Before that, this understanding that Indian music only exists in the north and the south, and whoever decided the north-south axis for division of the musical stream, it sounds like an oriental thing that has been brought out from the early research on Indian classical music, again a part of that oriental study by Western researchers. Now that we are in the post-independence era, we must take a final look at these things and question these choices. Left out in this binary classification of North Indian and South Indian was the East Indian school of classical music, which we traditionally call Odissi music, Odissi being an adjective that simply means from Odisha. Now this tradition of music is unique in the sense that it has its own treatises, it has its own shastraic tradition, it has its own performative tradition, which is also having certain characteristics, technical differences that differentiate it from the other systems. I will just begin with a brief introduction of what Odissi music is for people who are not aware of this tradition, and then I'll go into the more technical aspects, because I want to focus on the precise differences of this form and how rich the Indian tradition is to have come up with so many different regional versions of the same tree. So these are like different stems of the same tree. So Odissi classical music, like many other traditions, art traditions of Odisha, comes or was deeply practiced in the Jagannatha temple of Puri, where it is ritually rooted. Now we are all aware of Kaviraja Jayadeva, the author of the Gita Govinda, written in the 12th century. Now Jayadeva being from Odisha, the tradition is also known as the Jayadevi Parampara in our state. So the practice and singing of the Gita Govinda takes a central place in the repertoire of Odissi classical music. Jayadeva himself sang in the temple and taught students, and it is supposed to have come from his direct lineage. As we shall see later, the melodic and rhythmic techniques, that is the musicological techniques that Jayadeva employs in the Gita Govinda, continued to be in practice in the Odishan stream for a very, very long time. Even the compositions that followed the Gita Govinda followed that mold. So this tradition is also known by a variety of different names. It was known at one point as Utkala Sangita, the music of Utkala. It was also known as Udra Sangita. So these are just variant names of Odisha, Kalinga Sangita. But here is one early reference of music from the Odishan tradition. The Hathigumpa inscription of King Kharavela in what is now the Udayagiri and Khandagiri caves situated in Bhubaneswar. This is the 2nd century BCE. And in this inscription, the king Kharavela declares himself as an expert in the musical traditions. He calls himself Gandharva Veda Buddha. Now the Gandharva Veda is one of the early treatises of Indian classical music that we no longer find in complete condition. We find extracts to it here and there, and the text is so old that we find no clarity about what exactly constituted the text, but it came from the precursor of the present system of Indian music. So we know that the Gandharva Veda being in practice in Odisha, there has been a strongly local tradition of classical music since at least 2000 years. To add to that, there is a local Samavedic Gana tradition in South Odisha, which is known as the Utkala Patha, like you have Kashi Patha and other Pathas of the Samaveda. The Kauthuma Shakha has the Utkala Patha situated in South Odisha, especially in the Ghumusara region of South Odisha, from where many poets and composers of Odissi music hailed. So the Sama singing tradition here has a very distinctive flavor and employs certain melodic techniques that I shall talk about later. The Samavedic tradition, of course, is 3000, 4000 years old. In the temples of Odisha, you have plenty of sculpture. You find ample evidence of musical practice spread over the last 1500, 2000 years of sculpture. You find, like in this selection of images, you find the veena in the first image and the second image, and you find the mordala, which is the percussion instrument of the Odissi stream, in the third image. So in Konark and Puri, Jagannath temple, the Lingaraja temple of Bhubaneswar, you will find several intricate depictions of the instruments that were in use belong in that era. Similarly, for palm leaf manuscripts, as is known, Odisha was one of the strongest centers of manuscript production even until the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Even in the late 20th century, the practice of palm leaf manuscripts and also of illustrating palm leaf manuscripts. Illustrated palm leaf manuscripts were very, very widespread in Odisha, and therefore in that wealth you find a lot of documentation of the musical heritage. In this specific illustration from a private collection illustrated by the artist Raghunath Panigrahi, you can find very intricate depictions of the veena with exactly the number of pegs, the number of strings, the bridge, and everything is depicted very neatly. So you have this rich tradition backing the practice, and you also have a theoretic tradition that I'll just hop into. But before that, I will mention what is the essential core differentiator of Odissi music. Now, Odissi music employs a specific gamaka or a melodic nuance, which is it. You can think of a gamaka as a specific function applied on a note, on a static note. So there are 15 kinds of Gamakas in the Odishan tradition. The number of Gamakas differs in each of the Indian tradition. There are 15 Gamakas in the Odishan tradition, of which 2 are considered paramount or the dominating motifs, which help form a separate character to the music entirely. Now these melodic motifs are based on the curve. As you can see, these are 2 borders from the Pattachitra tradition, which is the classical painting tradition of Odisha, also in practice in the Puri temple, rooted in that temple tradition. In the Pattachitra painting tradition, you find close counterparts of these melodic forms. So there is the Andolita Gamaka, which is considered the chief Gamaka of the Odissi music tradition. The songs and compositions, and of course the Alapa and all aspects of the tradition make ample use of the Andolita Gamaka, and therefore are based around. So the tradition revolves around this Gamaka, you can say. Now the Andolita Gamaka sounds something like this. The fixed note, if we sing static fixed notes, it will sound like sa re ga ma pa da ni sa ni da pa ma ga ri sa. So that is plain note which we will sing in every tradition. In the Avarohi Kriya, in the Odishan tradition, we will use the Andolita, which sounds like sa ni da pa ma ga ri sa. This is Ekaguna, and if we do it in double the speed, it sounds like sa ni da pa ma ga ri sa. If you dissect this in a very physical manner, it is essentially sa ni sa da ni pada pada So it is oscillating between toe notes in a sinusoidal waveform, which is the Lahara Dhadi of the Patachitra tradition, which you see on top in the slide. The second essential Gamaka is what is known as the Kurula Gamaka. Now the Kurula Gamaka is formed by knotting together multiple of what is called the body and the Andolita Gamakas together. It sounds like Sa. So the Kriya that I just did, Nisa Nire Sare Nisa Dani Pa, is known as a Kurula. Essentially it is a 1 2 1 3 2 3 1 2, that kind of cascading structure, which again, if you make a wave out of it, the pitch time graph will turn out to be something like the Golei Dhadi of the Patachitra tradition, spiraling shapes entwined together. Now these two Gamakas are the characteristic features that differentiate the Odissi music tradition. So peculiar to the eastern region, these Gamakas are universally found not just in classical music but also in the folk music traditions of Odisha. So they are so typical to the local tradition, which is why Bharata Muni in the Natya Shastra, all of us know that he mentions 4 pravritis, he mentions the Udramagati pravriti. So the Andolita Gamaka is something like a universal characteristic of the Odia people. Whenever they sing, it comes in. In the Panchasakha, who were a group of 5 seer poets in the 15th, 16th century, so they used simplistic melodic forms for the transmission of philosophical knowledge. And there you find very elemental forms of the melodies being used, because the melodies need to be simple enough so that everybody is hooked and everybody can sing along. Even in these melodies, you find the use of the Andolita Gamaka. Something like when the Odia Bhagavata is sung, the translation of the Bhagavata Mahapurana into Odia done by Otibadi Jagannatha Dasa of the 16th century, so who was himself a great Odissi singer, and his family had Odissi music. His father was also a great singer. So used the peculiarities of the musical tradition and used them in a very, very elemental manner. So the Odia Bhagavata is written in the Nabakhyari Chanda, which is a 9-letter meter, and it is sung usually in the Adatali, which is a distinctive rhythmic cycle of the Odishan tradition, 4-3-4-3. How they will typically sing in the villages, one of the tunes of the zillions of tunes that are prevalent is Govinda, 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 Padugaru Chimakaranda, Semakaranda, Panakari, Hele Tarile Braja Nari. So even within this simple structure, you find Tarile na. You find not only the unique raga and tala structures, but more importantly the elemental Andolita Gamaka. So this comes from the folk tradition. Of course, the folk tradition is what gets codified later in every region of India and later forms the basis of the classical tradition. So that was the core motif. The core form is based on rounded forms or curved forms. The curved forms that you find in the Tribhangi of the Odissi dance tradition, or the curved forms that you find in the Patachitra tradition. Here you can see a rough sketch which is hidden after the painting. You can see the tipona of the Patachitra tradition, a very, very old tipona, and you can see it abounds in rounded forms. The mastery of the artist lies in harmoniously integrating these curved forms with a great command over the curvature of the form and how to balance the curves so that they remain in harmony with each other. So not only are the individual curves the dominant motif, the curvature is seen even in the posture of the figures. The curvature is seen in the mutual relation of the figures to each other. So that is how you find the Andolita motif in Odishan singing. It is that prevalent, not just at the macro level, but also at the micro level. So both big picture and small picture reveal the Andolita or the rounded characteristic that pervades the Odishan arts. With this, I would cite or make you listen to recordings of the early maestros, which we will come to the Guru Parampara in a while. For the Andolita Gamaka, here is a recording of Adiguru Singhari Syamasundarakara from the Puri tradition, from the Jagannatha temple tradition. He was a servitor of the deities at the temple, and this is a recording from the 1970s where he essentially delineates the features of Odissi music and again talks about the Andolita. In this small clipping, he will demonstrate many songs, singular lines from multiple compositions, and in there you can notice the throw of the voice. First of all, the throw of the Puri voice comes from a very deep voice culture, throwing from the navel, because most of the singers of the Puri stream come from the temple tradition. Therefore, they are rooted in the Vedic tradition, which was very much in practice in the Puri temple, and the throw of that tradition is found in the Puri tradition. So with that, I'll move into the demonstration by him. This will be around 1 minute.
ଓଡ଼ିଶାର ବିଶେଷତ୍ୱ ଏତିକି ମାତ୍ର ମୁଁ ଜାଣେ, ଓଡ଼ିଶାର ଗୋଟେ ଶୈଳୀ ଅଛି, ଅର୍ଥାତ୍ ସାହିତ୍ୟର ଶୈଳୀ, ସାହିତ୍ୟଟା ଭାଷା, ଶବ୍ଦ ବିନ୍ୟାସ ଗୁଡ଼ିକ ଠିକଣା କରି ରଖିବା ମାତ୍ର ଗୋଟେ ଛନ୍ଦ ଯାହା କହନ୍ତି। ଧରନ୍ତୁ ଆଜ ଏକି ଗୁମାନରେ, ଏଇ ଯୋଉ କଲ୍ୟାଣୀଟାକୁ ମୁଁ ଗାଇଲି, ଏଇ କଲ୍ୟାଣୀ ଆପଣ ଦେଖିବେ ବିଦେଶରେ ଅନ୍ୟ ହିନ୍ଦୁସ୍ତାନରେ ମଧ୍ୟ ପିଆ ବିନା ଏବେ ମଧ୍ୟ ତାଙ୍କର ଇମନ। ଆମର ଗାଉଛୁ ଆଜ ଏକି ଗୋମାନରେ ଚନ୍ଦ୍ରାନନା ଦେଖି ନାହିଁ ସପନ ରେ, ଏ ଯୋଉ ଆନ୍ଦୋଳନ ହେଇକି ଆସୁଛି ଆମର, ଏଇଟା ହଉଛି ଆମର ଗୋଟେ ପ୍ରଧାନ ଶୈଳୀ। ମୋର ନିଜର ଅଭିଜ୍ଞତା, ସବୁ ପ୍ରକାର ଶ୍ରେଣୀର ଆମର ସଙ୍ଗୀତ ଅଛି, ଆମର ମଧ୍ୟ ସବୁ ରଙ୍ଗରେ ଗୀତ ଅଛି। ସଙ୍ଗିନୀରେ ରାସ ରଙ୍ଗିନୀରେ ଦୋଷ କ୍ଷମା କର ଜୀବ ବନ୍ଧୁ ରୋଷନାରେ ସଙ୍ଗୀ ଶ୍ୟାମକୁ ଜୁହାର ତାର ପ୍ରୀତି କି ଜୁହାର ମା ଶ୍ୟାମକୁ ଜୁହାର କାହିଁକି ସଖୀ ବଳାଉ ମତେ ଗୋ। ଭାର ସୌନ୍ଦର୍ଯ୍ୟ ଗୋଟେ ମହାପ୍ରଭୁଙ୍କର ଜଣାଣ ଗାଉଛି। କାହିଁକି ପ୍ରଭୁ ମତେ ଦିଅ କଷଣ ତ୍ରାହିଏ ରଖେ ରମଣ, କାହିଁକି ପ୍ରଭୁ ମତେ ଦିଅ କଷଣ। ଜଗନ୍ନାଥ ରାମକୁ ମନରେ ହେଜ, ଜଗନ୍ନାଥ ରାମକୁ ଯମର ଗଳି ଭଞ୍ଜନ ଦେବାଧି ଦେବରାଜ, ଜଗନ୍ନାଥ ରାମକୁ ମନରେ ହେଜ, ଜଗନ୍ନାଥ ରାମକୁ।
So in that small clipping, he demonstrated multiple Tala cycles. He demonstrated Ekatali, then he demonstrated Rupaka, he also demonstrated Jhampa. So 10 matra, 6 matra and 4 matra. Within all those cycles, the musicians in the audience would have noticed how each was dealt with in a peculiar manner. First of all, there is a very dominant swing in all of the rhythms to enable the curvature to be executed in the melodic part for the Andolita and the Kurula movements. He also demonstrated a short segment of the plain singing in the Hindustani tradition. He sang one line, Sakhi Eriya Lipya Bin, which is a very famous bandish. And with that as one of the comparative references, he demonstrated the Odishan version of the Hindustani Raga Yaman, which is the Raga Kalyana or Kalyani, which is what he demonstrated there. The other songs that proceeded were in the Ragas Khambaja, then Kapi, then the last song that he sang in Jhampa was in the Raga Kedaragowda. So in the demonstrations, you would have noticed, first of all, this singing is of the local tradition of Odisha. We further subdivide it into 3 traditions, 3 sampradayas. One is the Puri sampradaya, which is the Sri Mandira sampradaya, we will say. The singers from the Jagannatha temple tradition, which had this kind of a throw. So each of the schools has its own separate peculiarities, with the main motives consistent across the schools. And there is a South Odishan school, which is the Ganjam school, which is more of a courtly singing style. So it technical prowess and more rooted in the Veena tradition from the string instrumental tradition. So more concerned about finer nuances of Shruti, Raga and all that. The Puri tradition is of course an expert in the Kala Angsa or the finer divisions of Tala in the Mardala tradition. So they were all great percussionists, which you can see in their singing. I will talk about the Kathak tradition later. These are the names of the 15 Gamakas, just for example. So Tiripa, Sphurita, Kampita, Leena, Andolita, Bali, Tribhinna, Kurula, Ahata, Unnamita, Plavita, Hunkruta, Mudrita, Namita, Mishrita. So the secondary motifs that pervade the musical stream, we already talked about Andolita, which is Sa Ni Da Pa. Then the Kurula, which is So that is the Kurula. Then you have what is the body? Pada Ni Sa Dani Pada Ni Sa. So that is one of the Kriyas. Then you Sariga Sa, that is called the Leena in our tradition. What is called the Kampita in the Odissi tradition is very, very different from what is called the Kampita in the Carnatic tradition. Our Kampita refers to a single note that is held, and in the Veena tradition we will quiver the string ever so gently to emulate the imperfections of the human voice. So, ni is called Kampita in our tradition because the human voice has Kampana inbuilt and cannot ever be stable. Then we have what is called the Ahata, which is a Gamaka which is applied in the Arohi Krama, hitting the note that is after the note that you want to hit. So Sa Re Ga Ma Pa Dha Ni Sa. So in the Aroha Krama we will use this Gamaka, and in the Avarohi Krama we will typically use more of the Andolita and the Kurula. That is a typical short alapa piece that will be used with all the Gamakas together. The Plabita is a forceful jump. Similarly, for the Hunkruta is a tradition that comes from Vedic singing where you pull the swara from the navel, which is not very commonly used except in the Tenaka technique. Then you have the Mudrita, which is holding the lips tightly together and singing, which becomes of great use, as Singhari sir mentioned in the earlier clip. When you maintain the Guru Laghu with precision, in the Guru Akshari you have to use the Mudrita Gamaka. So those are the 15 Gamakas. These 15 Gamakas are traditionally handed out more carefully in the Veena tradition because you are taught Alankaras in each of the Gamakas. Now we will come to the second example. This is singing of the South Odishan tradition or the Ganjam tradition. The rendition is by Gayaka Shiromani Apanna Panigrahi, who is from the courtly state of Paralakemundi, which was considered a place of great excellence of the musical arts. Many of the Shastras that I will mention later were written in Paralakemundi. So Gayaka Shiromani Apanna Panigrahi was the court musician of the Paralakemundi court at the time of Maharaja Krishna Chandra Gajapati in the early 20th century. So his dates are 1893 to 1936. This rendition is around the 1930s, just before he passed away. This is another kind of song in the Odishan tradition. This is what is called the Chanda Prabandha. Metric songs written to conventional meters with pre-composed tunes and rhythms. So this Chanda Prabandha acts like there is a prefixed template, say Raga Kamodi. There is a pre-composed template or a Chanda which binds together a tune in the Raga Kamodi, in the Tala Tripota, and in a 7-meter Chanda. So when this is tied together, that unit is provided by tradition. Why is it provided? It is provided as a gateway to beginners. So in every tradition there are poets who do not have the capacity to compose. There are people who can only compose but cannot author a lyric, and there are people who can do both of that, who are the ones who are called the Bhagyayokaras. Now, as a window to the tradition, you are provided with certain pre-composed tunes The tunes which have all these gamakas, so melodic nuances, rhythmic nuances, like in which tala where to take off from, which is the characteristic takeoff point for each tala, things like that. And from this chanda tradition, you have tunes that are as old as 500, 600 years, because they are found consistently across entire Odisha. The raga talas are found consistently mentioned in manuscripts. Most of the chandas don't have the dhruvapada. So it is from a period when the dhruvapada itself was not popular, and the dhruvapada is already popular by Jayadeva's time. So it harkens back to a much older tradition. And then you have the chanda tradition essentially forming a dharana, or the core elements bound tightly together of the classical tradition. You will find such templates for each of the ragas and each of the talas, and they number in the hundreds. This rendition by Gayaka Shiromani Apanna Panigrahi of the Kotli tradition of South Odisha, you will find elaborate melodic notices, what is called the gadi, or running phrases which span multiple octaves, because it is from the Veena tradition. You can see he is holding the Naradi Veena of the Odishan tradition. So they would roll their hand along the Veena and sing along with that. Here also you notice use of the Andolita and the Kurula Gamakas, and you find plenty of use of all the other Gamakas as well, because the Veena traditions were very careful to maintain all the 15 Gamakas in the Alap. So I will cut it off midway because it's a 3-minute rendition.
রাধা ধরি সখী কর বলঙ্কিয়া কত আউ ন কর লাগ ভয় ধারিণী কর ঘন শ্যাম গুণ মান রখিম ধৈর্য গুমান
So you'd have noticed the Andolita that he frequently uses. This was in the raga Todi Paraja, which is another unique raga of the Odishan tradition. I'll talk about ragas in a minute, but before that, let us talk about the textual or the theoretical tradition. Odisha, being a very, very small region, has produced a great number of musical treatises or Sangita Shastras over the last 500 years. Of course, the Gita Govinda being written here, it is certain that even in the 12th century there would have been a strong Shastraic tradition, for Jayadeva is among the first Vagyakaras or composers in India who mentions both the raga and the tala, and uses Sanskrit to great musical effect. His language comes with the softness, the curvature that you identify with the Odishan tradition. With that in mind, here is an image of Krishnadasa Bodajana Mahapatra, whose Gita Prakasha, written sometime in the 1550s, and he was contemporary to the Gajapati Mukunda Deva and a courtier of his Sabha. Krishnadasa was so influential that he was sent to Akbar's court from the Odishan court, and Abul Fazl in his Ayani Akbari mentions that Mahapatra was very virtuosic in the musical arts and praises him greatly. And Krishnadasa Bodajana Mahapatra has authored a treatise, and he has written elaborately, even though the text is a very succinct text, he has made elaborate notes on the present practice and past practice of his era, and he has presented his own innovative things. So this Gita Prakasha, the cornerstone of the Odishan tradition. But we also have other texts preceding the Gita Prakasha, some of which have been found only partially, such as the Sangita Sara of Harinayaka from the 14th century, the Kalankura Nibandha, of which certain Kalankura Nibandha in Odia. So some of these are in Sanskrita and some of these are in Odia. So even in the 15th century, you find Odia texts being revered in the Odishan tradition. So you have the Gita Prakasha by Krishnadasa, as I already mentioned. You have the Gita Prakasha Boli, which is a translation of the Gita Prakasha into Odia by one of Krishnadasa's own students, Giri Godadhara Dasa. Then you have Sangita Muktabali and the Sangita Narayana, which are the two most important texts, or the most widely followed texts after the Gita Prakasha. And in the Sangita Muktabali, written by Harichandana, you also find elaborate notes in Odia. In the Sangita Narayana, you find in the appendices illustrations of several songs, both in Sanskrit of exactly the Gita Govinda mold, and also you find Odia songs. Now, my Guru Parampara used to follow the Sangita Narayana greatly, because they came from the South Odishan tradition, and the Sangita Narayana was authored in the court of Parala Khemundi by Kaviratna Purushottama Mishra. Apart from that, you also find the Sangita Kalpalatika also written in Puri, just like the Gita Prakasha. You find the Sangita Arnava Chandrika, again written in South Odisha, and you find the Sangita Sarani, written by the son of the author of the Sangita Narayana. So, for a state of the size of Odisha, of course the borders were much further in the 15th century. You find significant output on the technical aspects of music, and the texts document the unique local tradition, as in they document the local talas, they document the local ragas, they document the Gamakas, and we'll just talk about what else they document. They document the names of the Shrutis, which are different in the Odishan tradition. The 22 Shrutis that are the founding stone of the entire Indian musical tradition. So the Shruti names differ. In the right column, you can see the pan-Indian names of the Shrutis as mentioned in the Sangita Ratnakara, Tivra, Kumudvati, Manda, Chandovati, that are known all across India. But in Odisha, all the treatises mention Nandi, Vishala, Somukhi, Vichitra, Chitra, Ghana, Chalanika, and so on. So that's how they would be placed 4-3-2-2, of course. So Nandi, Vishala, Somukhi, Vichitra of Shadaja, Chitra, Ghana, Chalanika of Rushabha, Sarasa, Mala of Gandhara, and likewise Magadhi, Shiva, Matangika, Maitreyi, Bala, Kala, Kalaraba, Sangaraba, then Rasa, Amruta, Vijaya, Madhukari. So these are the Shrutis of the Odishan tradition, the 22 Shrutis. The names of the Shrutis were different, and the names of the Murchanas were also different. So the Grama Murchana Paddhati, by which the Indian scales or the early ragas were derived, was in practice in Odisha even until the early 20th century. When people who had learned in the 19th century survived, they would still follow the Grama Murchana system. Because the Mela system has not at all been mentioned in the Odishan treatises, it was not at all accepted in Odisha. So you can imagine how much of a conservative the society is, that they are exposed to the Mela tradition from external treatises, but they won't subscribe to it because they stick to the older tradition. And the Veenakara tradition was all the more conservative in this regard. And they maintained the older names of the Murchanas and the Shrutis. And the Mela system was only formed in Odisha sometime in the mid-20th century. And of course, they're already at a backlog of 400 years from the rest of India, because they've not accepted the Mela system, and now the situation is such that they're forced to update themselves with the norm in the country. So these are the names of the Murchanas: Lalita, Madhyama, Chitra, Rohini, Matangaja, Sovira, Varnamadhya. And to the right again you see the pan-Indian names of Uttaramandra, Rajani, Uttarayata, which are very well known. Now the crucial point is that all the texts of the Odishan tradition specifically mentioning these very different names for the Shrutis and the Murchanas points to an older origin that has not been located exactly. As we all know, we say Shiva Mata, Hanuman Mata, etc. in the Indian tradition, and many older texts such as Omapatam, Dattilam, or the texts of that period, Kohaliyam, have not been located exactly. The Odishan tradition makes a specific mention to Kohala again and again, and Kohalacharya seems to have come from the Tantric tradition, which is very apparent in when we call it Kohala Agam or Kohala Tantra. Now, Odisha, being rooted in the Tantric tradition, seems to prefer different names because the Ratnakara comes from a different ancestor and this comes from a different ancestor. Perhaps the ancestor text has not been found as of yet. Otherwise, there could not have been such a crucial difference. Then we come to the more perceptible aspects, such as the raga names. before going into demonstrations of the ragas, which you've already heard, demonstrations of the raga Kedara Gowda, the raga Kalyana by Singari sir, and the raga Todi Paracha by Gayako Shiromani Apanna Panigrahi, you would already have noticed that some of these raga names are shared, such as the Kalyana or Kalyani, which Singhari Shyamasundar Kara depicts, is a name that is found across the Indian tradition, but there are specific sangatis that he used that are not found elsewhere. Similarly, in Kedara Gowda, he used the Shuddha Nishada or the Kakali Nishada. Sa re ma pa ha ha So you find this is the form of the Odishan Kedara Gowda, which is documented in the Gita Prakasha, the Sangita Narayana. The peculiar use of the Kakali Nishada in contrast with the Komala Nishada. The Nyasa on the Komala Nishada. The dominant of the Kurula Gamaka. These are things like that we can discuss at length about each of the ragas in this tradition, but because of paucity of time, here are the names. You will notice certain names that are found across India with differing local structures, and you will find certain names that are peculiar to the local tradition and are not found elsewhere. Names, and you will find unique regional pronunciations of names that exist in variations across other parts of India, such as Natta, Baradi, the raga which is known as Barati or Varali in other parts of India. The raga name, the structure of course is entirely different. Kamodi, Gowda, Dhanashri, Nalini Gowda. So names like Nalini Gowda are very unique to the Odishan tradition. Ananda Bhairavi, raga name that is found across India but is one of the very, very prominent, one of the signature melodies of the Odishan tradition in songs like Kishobha Kunje Madana Mohana Chahare Pranamitani. So this is a raga which uses both the Gandharas, both the Daivatas and both the Nishadas. The use of these twin swaras is done within the motif of the Kurula Gamaka or the Andolita Gamaka, which makes it very, very intriguing to grasp. Similarly, you have other ragas such as Madhyamadi, Shokavaradi, Chokhi, which is a name unique to the Odishan tradition, Saberi, found across India, this name, Gujjari, Ghantaraban, very, very old Shastraic name found in the early treatises, preserved in the Odishan tradition. Shuddha Basanta, again a name preserved in the Odishan tradition from archaic Indian tradition. Panchama Baradi, exclusive to the indigenous tradition, things like that. Panchama Baradi is another raga that I would like to demonstrate. So you can note the use of the swaras. Gama pada nisa nisa ri ga ri ma ga ri sa ni da ni sa ri sa ni sa ni ri sa ni da ni da sa ni sa da ni pa pada pa ni da ni pada ma pa ga gama pada pa ni da ni pada ma pa ma da pada ma pa ga ma re ma ga ma ri ga sa. So this usage of swaras, this is a raga that uses all the 12 swaras in special sangatis. It's one of the most peculiar ragas of the Odishan tradition. And here you see how they dealt with swaras. And then you have the method of appending prefixes to form variations of ragas. Ragas that are formed by branching of other ragas or by amalgamating two ragas in equal proportions based on the Murchana system again, because the Murchana system was prevalent. So you have Kedara, just note the prefixes used. Kumbha Kedara, Krishna Kedara, Khanda Kedara, Chalaganta Kedara, Mangala Kedara, then Pahadiya Kedara, Lalita Kedara, Kalahangsa Kedara. These are names that find hundreds of references in palm leaf manuscripts from the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries found across Odisha. There are also some names among these are household names in the Odishan tradition, such as Pahadiya Kedaro is known across villages, Kalahangsa Kedaro is known across villages, things like that. So for ragas that use multiple versions of the same note, like two gas, two dhas, two knees, these ragas are very you can say these are the more traditional parts of the Odishan repertoire. These are the ragas that are more have been researched to a greater extent in the Odishan tradition. The focus was on these, and to use the higher variety in the ascending, the lower variety in the descending, and how to use it within the Gamakas, that has remained a obsession of the Odishan Purvacharyas. We also had the Raga Chitra tradition, which was called Raga Patti locally. This is one of the earliest Raga Pattis depicting the ragas Malabo, the one in the top left, the one in the bottom left being the Raga Ramakiri, the bottom right being Malasri. These are all very archaic ragas of the Odishan system, and they are the primary ragas derived from the Murchana system. So the practice was to look at the Raga Patti and sing, because the Raga Chitra is supposed to have contained the philosophical essence of the Raga Swarupa, which was greater than the melodic Swarupa, which was not as permanent as this form. So the melodic structure changes ever so slightly over centuries, but this is the Nitya Rupa of the ragas, which doesn't change ever. It is like meditating upon deities. The practice taught was to invoke the raga by singing the dhyana, which is a practice still persists in the Odishan tradition. The dhyana will be sung in the alapa, and the musicians were given these pattis. Such close association between the visual tradition and the melodic tradition, the musical tradition, I don't think is that common in other parts of India as of the late 20th century or even the late 19th century. So this is a unique raga, again Kakubha of the Odishan tradition. You can see the Chitrakara maintains the exact dhyana mentioned unanimously across the musical treatises of Odisha. Vane rudanti pikanada dona pitang vasana vasanang sukeshi. So she is roaming in the forest, and hearing the cries of the cuckoo gets afraid. This is the murti or the dhyana of the raga Kakubha. The melodic structure of the raga Kakubha is something like this. Sarima pa dha ni sa sa ni da pa pa dha pa ni da pa ma ga re sa ni sa re ma ga re sa re ga re sa. This structure, to take as a case study, corresponds closely to the Grama Murchana system definition given in the Sangita Narayana, and even in the late 18th century, 19th century treatises such as the Sangita Sarani, they mention this definition. So if you take the Murchana, this is the first Murchana, you will get what is the Komala Gandhara, the flat Gandhara, and the Nishada in the scale. But the usage is very peculiar. The Sangatis and which note is to be oscillated to which note have been preserved in the tradition, and for there we find a very close alliance between both of these. And we find compositions in these ragas being done even into the late 20th century. So a composition in the raga Kakubha in the Jati Tala, which is 3-4-3-4, a 14 beat rhythmic cycle, by my guru's guru Acharjya Tarini Charan Patra, runs something like this. Mohana murali dhari ahe shyama, mohana murali dhari ahe shyama, mohana murali dhari. Sikhi pucha chula ranga jamudala, ho sikhi pucha chula ranga jamudala, runja gunja mala dhari, mohana murali dhari. that gives an idea about how the Gamakas are dealt with within the rhythmic cycle. And for the Tala structure, these are the Talas that are used: Ekatali, Khemota, Jhula, Rupaka, Tripota, Jhampa, Jati Tala, which I just now demonstrated, Adatali, Sarimana, which is 4244, uniquely named, Aditala, Nissari, Kuduka, Matha. The names Nissari, Kuduka, Matha are very, very old names that are preserved. Pahapata, Ashtatala, which is mentioned by Jayadeva in the Gita Govinda alongside Jatitala and Ekatali, and Paditala. These are some of the talas that are unique. We will take up for demonstration a few talas, but before that, the percussion instrument that is used is the mardala, which has unique construction, unique bani or percussion rhythmic syllables, and unique playing style. The placement of the hand and how the banis are produced from the instrument are different, as is the instrument itself, because both of the sides of this instrument have what is called the kirana, and a paste is not used in either of the sides, not on the left side. So this is a picture containing multiple views of the mardala. In the Shastras, the Odissi Shastras especially will say Anadhe Mardala Shrestha, which the mardala is the best among percussion instruments. And about the sonic character of the mardala, we listen to a few recordings, short recordings. It is a very bassy instrument with a deep resonance, and it somehow captures the tendency to use the talas with a swing, which is found in the songs that I just sang. You will find they are not very staccato movement in each of the beats of the rhythmic cycle. They rather move with a lilt, ever so slightly swinging against the bass rhythm. Some of the chief composers whose compositions we listen to as part of the demos are Kaviraja Jayadeva, of course, the author of the Gita Govinda; Kavi Samrat Upendra Bhanja, who was one of the great composers of the Odissi tradition from the 17th century to the early 18th century; Bhakta Kavi Banamali Das of Puri. So he's also he uses many ragas and rhythmic melodic nuances peculiar to the Puri region. Kavi Surya Baladeva Ratha, the author of the Kishora Chandrananda, the Champu being a genre of songs in Odisha in which there are 34 songs after the 34 consonants of the Varnamala, and for each of the songs, all of the lines of the song starts with the same letter. So there is a Ka song, there is a Kha song, there is a Ga song. All lines of the Ka song will begin with the letter Ka. This tradition of paying respect and composing in accordance with the letters comes from the Tantric tradition where the Matrakas were revered. Then you find Kavi Kalahangsa, Gopal Krishna Pattanaik. Again, both of these poets are from South Odisha, Kavi Surya and Kavi Kalahangsa. So their songs find the peculiarity of the South Odishan tradition, and you will find the specific rhythmic takeoffs, the prevalence of the Gaudi motif in Gopal Krishna's compositions, the prevalence of the early Prabandha format in Kavi Surya's compositions. You find several nuances like that. But following Kavi Samrat Upendra Bhanja, who is the most versatile composer or Vagyakar, who has done almost any kind of thing that can be done, was carried on the great legacy that he left, and the fact that he illustrated specific approaches to composition in his compositions. He made very few compositions, but he illustrated the variant approaches, so the rhythm dominant approach, the melody dominant approach, the sahitya dominant approach, the bhava dominant approach, a balance of these aspects, the different gitis, then of course the different kinds of kavya, the use of kavya dominant in alankara, the use of kavya not dominant in alankara, the use of kavya for great sonic effect, for great literary effect. All of that is explored by Bhanja, and the models that he sets are used to great effect by the trinity of Odissi music, as you can call them: Banamali, Gopala Krishna and Kavi Surya. And these are the three great masters of the three schools. The first is Ashtavadhani Acharjya Tarini Charan Patra from the Ganjam school, great master of the Ganjam school in the 20th century. As I was saying, very rooted in the Veena tradition. Secondly, Gayakaratna Singhari Syama Sundarakara, whose singing you just heard from the Puri tradition with the deep bassy voice culture and dominance of rhythmic kriyas from the Kala Angsa lineage of the Mardala playing tradition. And last of all, Balakrishna Das, Sangita Sudhakara Pandita Balakrishna Das from the Kathak tradition, which was the Renaissance tradition. Ever from the 18th century onwards, Kathak became the central place of musical cultivation, because Puri and Ganjam, the ancient centers of music, were disturbed by foreign rule. Mostly Mughal rule and the British East India Company disrupted the local patronage systems of these ancient places, and Kathak became the new economic capital and the political capital. Therefore, the musical tradition also was became very rooted in that place ever since the last 150-200 years. And representing that tradition is Sangita Sudhakara Balakrishna Das, who pays great attention to the proper enunciation of each syllable, and they pay great attention to communicating the right bhava through the right enunciation and intonation of the words. So they will look at that as in the word scale, the sentence scale, the overall scale, and all that. Now for a few illustrations of the talas, after which I shall end this talk. I will present renditions of these talas alongside plain mardala playing of a single cycle for the purpose of demonstration. So the dominant 4-matra tala in the Odissi tradition is called Ekatali. As I was talking earlier, the swing is a very prevalent motif in the Odissi talas, because the instrument mardala itself has deep resonance, which is used to great effect. The pronounced resonance is used to great effect with the swing. So the matras move, or the kalas move to make way for the resonance, resulting in this structure. And which is why Odissi songs cannot be sung to the regular beat accompaniment of, say, the theka of the tabla, which is a problem that early singers of Odissi music, when they were called for gramophone recordings in the early 1900s to Kolkata, and they could not find a local percussionist, so they could not sing Odissi songs, because of which they had to specifically take percussion. So it's a very well-known tale in Odisha of singers going to Kolkata and being unable to sing to the accompaniment of any instrument other than the mardala, because it is simply difficult to recreate the pronounced resonance effect in other instruments. The 4-matra Ekatali in the Odissi tradition goes something like 1, 2, 3, 4. Ta, ati na kartak nakatini ta, ti na kartak nakatini ta, which is the swing is there in the first 2 matras itself. The details of the tala are written here. The songs go something like in accordance with this. Most of the songs set to Ekatali. So songs will look ta, ti na kartak nakatini. Kiso bhago kunje. This is the Ananda Bhairavi song I just depicted. So this is the dominant 4-beat rhythm cycle or tala in the Odissi tradition. So plain 1, 2, 3, 4 is not the dominant motif. Now for the tala on the mardala. So that's how it sounds. Of course, that was the base rhythm. There are several variations that are, or binyasas as we call them in the Odissi tradition, when it is sung. Here is a rendition by Pandit Raghunath Panigrahi, Padma Shri, who was known as Gita Govinda Panigrahi because he was extremely adept and helped preserve the tradition of Gita Govinda in our state. He sings a composition of Kavi Samrat Upendra Bhanja set to the Raga Natanarayana, which is again mentioned in all the treatises, set to Ekatali. This is a very, very long recording which I encourage you to listen with the traditional flourishes of the Ganjam school, and because the elaboration or the binyasa, what is known as the Badat in the Hindustani tradition, will be called the Bistaro in our tradition. And the Bistaro is done in a peculiar manner, which is a hallmark of the South Odissi school. And please observe how the Mardala adapts to the changes. I will just play it for one ghosa and one antara, which is the refrain and the antara pada.
Srimati Sripati Vrindavane Keli Raji श्रीमती श्रीपते वृंदावने केली रचिले श्रीमती श्रीपते वृंदावने केली रचिले श्रीमती श्रीपते वृंदावने केली रचिले वृंदावने केली रचिले श्रीमती श्रीपते वृंदावने केली रचिले श्रीमती श्रीपते वृंदावने केली रचिले श्रीमती श्रीपते वृंदावने केली रचिले वृंदावन शोभा करू वृंदावन शोभा करू तरु ताले कल्पतरु वृंदावन शोभा तरु तरु ताले कल्पतरु तरुणीरतन तरु तरलकी मातिले श्रीमती श्रीपति वृंदावने केली रचिले श्रीमती श्रीपति वृंदावने केली रचिले.
So that was an illustration of Ekatali. I hope you were able to follow along. Now that was a Tala that has no parallel, has seldom parallels in the other tradition. Let us come to a Tala which has clear parallels in the other traditions, so that we can compare the difference in treatment across traditions. This is the Tala Tripota, which structure is 3+2+2, and here is what it sounds like. So this is one of the sthai yukutas, and a simpler version would be dhei tathindak tathindak. So that is also used. Now this is a Tala which is clear parallels. You will find a 3+2+2 Tala structure in the Hindustani tradition as well as the Carnatic tradition. Let us listen to a rendition by Sangita Sudhakara Balakrishna Das from the Kathak school, so that we can follow how the elaboration of this Tripota is done and how the structure of the songs differs. This is the Bha song from the Champu that I just mentioned, a composition of Kavi Surja set to the Raga Kedara Gowda. Now in this, you can see first of all all of the lines begin with the letter Bha because it is the Bha Champu. And in the rendition, please follow how the meter of the song goes with reference to the cross rhythm of the Mordala. And again, I'll play it for one stanza.
সখী জানো রে সখী জানো রে ধরণী তুল জানো মাধ বাণ রে ধরণী তুল জানো মাধ বাণ রে ধরণী তুল জানো মাধ বাণ রে পূজা পাশ কুছন্দি নগরে পূজা পাশ কুছন্দি নগরে বিরিপদ খঞ্জ খঞ্জ ধরি তলে ভূমণ্ডল রে ভূমণ্ডল রে ভোলা মানুছি দেখ মুখ সুধা ময়ূখ ভোলা মানুছি দেখ মুখ সুধা ময়ূখ রে ভোলা মানুছি দেখ মুখ সুধা ময়ূখ ভোলা মানুছি দেখ মুখ সুধা ময়ূখ রে ভোলা মানুছি দেখ মুখ সুধা ময়ূখ ভরত তর সঙ্গীতর চলা রে খরত তর সঙ্গীতর চলা রে তীরকে দৃষ্টি রাখ সখী রে শিলকে দৃষ্টি রাখ সখী রে দিশে চলাচল চারু চন্দ্রিকা চুল দিশে চলাচল চারু চন্দ্রিকা চুল
So that was a demonstration of tripota. You would have noticed the elaborate percussion that was going on in the background. That is how it is traditionally followed. The song is also of a great length. That is how audition songs are. So they are of significant length. They don't end in a few lines. There are multiple lines containing enough melodic and rhythmic material and also literary material. The literary content is also very, very rich, of a very high caliber. Now, in the middle portion of the song, you would have noticed there was a point where he switched to a 6-beat cycle. That is a portion of the antara, which is known as the body. Something very, very unique to the audition tradition. The body is a part of the antara where you have the freedom to cycle through different talas and where the laya typically goes into double of what it used to be earlier. When the body ends, then you again return to the ghosa or the refrain, where you again come back to the original laya. So it is a technique of playing with the laya which has come from the tradition of Suda Prabandha. Kavi Surja's compositions bear this elaborate structure that you just listened to, which is why his compositions are known as markers of technical excellence among singers of the state. With this, we'll come back to another very, very unique tala called Adatali, which I mentioned in the beginning. It is 14 mantras split into 4-3-4-3. And the peculiar thing is, it doesn't begin, the drum doesn't start playing from the first matra. The first two matras are silent, after which it picks up from the third matra. Usually, that is the basic ukuta, the basic structure of the tala. So the songs are also structured that way. We will listen to a song. Before that, please mark. So it will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. That's how it will go. So at the beginning, you'll hear 3, 4. 3, 4. So let me play that again for reference. So the silence that you listen to is 1, 2, the beginning 1, 2. that's how this structure follows. Now for a song in this, again back to Raghu Babu. This is a traditional Ragamala Prabandha, which has a garland of ragas woven together. So it has Ananda Bhairavi, it has Kedaragoda, it is a variety of ragas in this Prabandha. It's a early 20th century Prabandha, just to illustrate, because we have heard a lot of early Prabandhas from the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th. This is a late Prabandha, and here also the Padi technique is done, but I don't think we can make you listen up to that length. So I will just again keep it to the first Gosa and the Antara. But the Antara here also is quite significant.
नाही के करी देला नाही के करी देला काहे की गो नीतनी नाही के करी देला काहे की गो नाही के करी देला चाही सरणी हेला असरणी राती चाही सरणी हेला चाही सरणी हेला असरणी राती असरणी राती नाही के करी देला काहे की गो नीतनी लेखी कमल दले केतकी कंठधारे लेखी कमल दले केतकी कंठधारे लेखी कमल दले
So that is basically the structure that you will see in Adatali. With that, I think I've presented significant illustrations. That is the generic form. I made it a point so that we could listen to more renditions of the earlier maestros. You can find complete renditions online. You can just search for Odissi music for more illustrations of the form. And you have several books on the topic already published. So please follow the tradition. Please listen to more renditions so that you can grasp more of the nuances that this tradition also possesses, as in all the other traditions. I hope that a complete knowledge of all the regional traditions of India will enable us a fuller understanding of what existed in ancient India. When we talk about the music of the Sangita Ratnakara or the Dattilam, we cannot comprehend them fully without appreciating each of the regional traditions entirely by themselves, because each of them holds something from the archaic tradition that might have been lost from the other traditions. So that's how I encourage all of you to look upon, research, and listen to more renditions of this tradition. I hope this talk was helpful in that sense. Thank you.
Yes, sir, it was absolutely helpful. Thank you for the elaborate and extensive account on the subject. It was a mellifluous journey in the annals of Odissi classical music, and we wish to have many such talks with you. Thank you very much. Namaste.